Let's bring you this now. The Civil Aviation Authority of South Africa is alarmed by the rising number of cases linked to safety concerns in the sector. In January alone, 14 incidents and 8 fatalities were recorded, most resulting from human error, mechanical failure or weather conditions. The regulatory authority aims to halve aviation accidents in the next 5 years and is calling on players in the sector to comply with the safety regime that's currently in place. Just yesterday, the Aviation Authority hosted a national conference to examine the state of the industry and how to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic and its many challenges. For more on this, let's bring in Khoza. She's CEO of SACAA, joining us now via our video link from the South African capital. Poppy, great to chat to you. Thanks so much for making time. I've always been of the view that safety is quite an incredible commodity within the aviation industry. One incident is one too many, but there were 14 in January alone. You must be quite concerned.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course, we are very concerned. And the reason why we're so concerned is because we last saw the spike of the accidents almost of this nature in October 2008, which was seriously concerning to the Civil Aviation Authority, because as you've rightly stated, one incident in our world is one incident too many. But I must indicate that when we talk about the accidents that we are concerned about, we're talking about the accidents in the general aviation area, which is more private flying. And when you look at the record in terms of the airline environment, you will see that South Africa has done exceptionally well in terms of maintaining a 0% accident rate in the scheduled passenger airliner. So we are quite proud about that record, and that is a record that we want to preserve. Where we are most concerned about, and the Minister of Transport has made it very clear, including in the National Aviation Conference meeting that we had yesterday, or rather the aviation conference that we had yesterday, to say we need to seriously introspect, and a target has already been set to say we need to have accidents in this sector, which is private flying, simply put, by 50% in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And hence are all on deck in terms of ensuring that we get to that. To that extent, the Civil Aviation Authority, in collaboration with the industry, has come up with a safety strategy called the General Aviation Safety Strategy, which will contribute immensely in terms of halving the accidents in this environment.
We'll speak about the strategy in a bit more detail in just a moment. I just want to hone in on the distinction you made between commercial activity and what's happening in the private aspect of the sector. The concern, of course, is that at some stage in some pilots' lives, those who fly privately could very well end up flying commercially in their career. And so it's in that respect that this is a concern for the entire sector.
Absolutely, and that is because, of course, any pilot, for instance, any aircraft maintenance engineer, they could be working both in the private sector or private environment or private area, as well as commercial. And our view is always that there's a particular standard that we want to maintain. I'm very much aware of the fact that, of course, we're talking about, I would say, almost two different areas, in that the other one, of course, speaks to, commercial, bigger aircraft and so on. But when you look at the general aviation, it's mainly small aircraft. Perhaps it could be a 2-seater, it could be an 8-seater, and it differs. But then you could be a pilot holding different licenses that allows you to operate in both environments. And our view is that we need to maintain the similar airmanship in both areas,
right,
which is the reason why we are saying we need to ensure that we sharpen the approaches equally. What we see in the airline environment, which works very well, we would want that to be emulated equally in the general aviation flying.
Of course, each accident has its own unique circumstances, but where does it appear we're getting things wrong?
According to the accident reports as we receive them, the number one factor of the causes of the accidents is human factors, and it is followed by maintenance, and then there would be weather and so on. So our call really is that we have to ensure that if you are a pilot, there is a particular set of standards and rules that must always be observed. And as I've indicated, that human factors rank number one. And that trend is not necessarily in South Africa, but we see that worldwide that seems to be a problem where, the attitude is such that, the private flying environment, I can do as I please. When you juxtapose that with the airline environment, it is very strict. It is you do everything according to the book. It's very, very stringent. So we are saying you can't be reckless when you are in private flying. It just cannot be, because an accident is bound to happen. And then the issues of maintaining aircraft is also another causal factor, which ranks second. But also you will have issues of weather, for instance. There could be issues of fuel starvation, where a pilot will not have enough fuel, or rather calculate enough fuel, for the next, to prepare adequately for the next destination, and you find that an accident does happen in between. So those are the points. Yeah.
Sorry for coming in there. The impression I'm getting is that some of them, if not most of these accidents, are actually quite avoidable. But you'll set me straight on that one. The other thing that we obviously need to be cognizant of is, outside of the loss of life, the impact of these accidents can be far-reaching. How much is it costing SACAA to actually respond to some of these accidents?
I cannot necessarily put a cost at this point in time, and that is because it varies. Investigations depends on the complexity of the investigation. But I can indicate to you that whenever there is an air crash, there is a cost involved, because then you have the investigators who have to respond to an accident, and of course that becomes costly to the fiscus, because you will find that it is a one-man show. And if an accident happens, it cannot be ignored. It needs to be investigated, and we need to understand what caused that accident. In fact, the families, perhaps of the deceased, if it culminates into a fatality, are also interested in knowing as to what caused that accident. But also, the investigation is also to look at the causal factors, so that we can intensify regulatory or regulations in terms of ensuring that those accidents are avoided in the future. But the cost is quite enormous, because if we think about the 14 accidents that happened in January, all of them have to be investigated. In fact, all of them are in the process of being investigated, and it does come at a huge cost. Search and rescue alone comes at a huge cost, and as you are rightly saying, many of these accidents are in fact avoided. Yeah. There will be those ones that really are unavoided because they were never foreseen.
Right. I mean, I can appreciate how you don't have an exact figure, but can you at least help us get an idea of the proportion that we're speaking of? So of the total costs that SACAA has to pay out, how much of a proportion do things like accident usually take up?
I can provide you with the figures, perhaps even out of this meeting. But I would say roughly in terms of the budget, we look at about roughly 40-50 million per annum.
Wow.
But then again, if we have a big and serious accident, we have another mechanisms in terms of engaging, the department or the National Treasury to, make more funds available. We haven't really had a situation where it got to a point where we have had to, go and knock at the doors and ask for additional funding. But I would say roughly in terms of the budget, not more than 50 million per annum.
Right. The objective, of course, is to try halve these accidents in the next 5 years if the information at my disposal is anything to go by. But you're going to need a multi-pronged approach to get this right. Which aspect of that is faltering the most?
So as I did indicate earlier, that we have come up with a strategy, which I would say is a well-consulted strategy, because it was done with the industry or in collaboration with the industry, and it zooms into the issues of training, the issues intensifying on just looking at the regulatory regime, and if at all we need to change and amend the regulations, that those are the things that we are looking at. The issues of ensuring that maintenance is done accordingly. So it is a layered approach, but that looks at all matters holistically, from the aircraft itself or the machine to the human who's going to be piloting that aircraft. So it is all encompassing.
Absolutely, and one can only hope that we get it right even before the next 5 years. Who knows? Thanks very much for your time.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate sharing with us what you can. Khoza is the CEO of the South African Civil Aviation Authority. Once again, Poppy, thanks very much indeed.